Welcome to your week 7 waiver wire report. Hard to believe it is week 7 already. Not a great week in week number 6. Scoring is way down. It's pretty rough out there. Give your favorite fantasy football analyst a hug if you run into them in the street or whatever, virtually. Give them a virtual bro hug. Kind of rough out there with the scoring down continually, but Monday Night Football was at least pretty decent for the Dallas Cowboys. Let's get into some of the choice selections from the waiver wire report over at fantasypoints.com. Very comprehensive report that we put a lot of time into and effort. Mostly the grinder, Tom Brawley. I go in there every week, though, do some tweaking, updating throughout the week, and I pop in my top 15 pickups of the week. Kind of varies in terms of priority and expectations, as always, for these picks, as I probably talk about every week on these videos. Some people are short-term additions, especially at running back. We'll get into a case or two like that where the starter is going to be out for maybe just 1 week, like in LA. Some are more long-term. For example, Devin Singletary in Houston. Not a sexy pick or dramatic pick for this week by any stretch, but it is becoming more and more clear that Dameon Pierce not a great fit for this new blocking scheme. Not that Devin Singletary is, but getting a lot more opportunities. But let's get into a few players that I'm going to highlight here that I have on my list here of top 15 priority ads for the week. And if you're not a subscriber to fantasypoints.com and you are interested, you can save 25% by using the promo code GURIFIC, like the word terrific, GURIFIC 25% off. All right, let's get to, well, I don't know, quarterback wise, I believe I did Sam Howell last week, and he's back on the list, still available in a decent percentage of Yahoo leagues coming out of week number 6. I can call that up real quick, but hey, I thought that was a pretty big test this week on the road against that feisty Atlanta defense that's been pretty stingy. And Sammy Howell only owned it 38% of Yahoo leagues. I thought he passed it with flying colors. And I looked at the schedule and really don't see any more problem areas for Sam Howell, who is absolutely entrenched here as the starter. Ron Rivera loving it. He is scrappy as hell, no doubt about it. Now, the only problem is weeks 15 and 16. Boy, a couple of nasty matchups. Maybe Sammy can grow from now until then, but he's got the Jets and the Niners those 2 weeks. But very good showing by Sammy Howell. And while I'm at it, I might as well get into one of the waiver wire wide receivers I did want to point out, and that is Kurt Samuel, who's been around the block. We've seen this before with Kurt Samuel. It gets a little hot there. Actually played for Ron Rivera there in Carolina, and had some moments there under Riverboat Ron. But, he is definitely clicking with Sam Howell, and he's been pretty consistent at that with 42 plus receiving yards in 5 of 6 games. Logan Thomas came up small in week 6. We've been talking about how Howell seems to be looking to throw it between the numbers, basically. But again, Logan Thomas came up small, yet my man Curtis Samuel put up 14 plus fantasy points for the 3rd straight week. He's got over these 3 weeks, 17 catches for 158, 2 receiving touchdowns, and a 1-yard rushing touchdown. Of course, he's a threat to do that. 50.9 fantasy points in weeks 4 through 6. That is not too shabby. And Jahan Dotson, I'm sure he's going to emerge at some point. He has to, but I think Curtis Samuel is a thing that will continue as long as Sam Howell plays decent football. They don't run the ball all that well. He's in some ways a small extension of their running game. And again, guy gets open. Eric Bieniemy coming over from Kansas City. He likes these slippery inside, outside, versatile types, receiving running back types like Curtis Samuel. So it really is a perfect fit. So again, I do think this could continue. Check your league leaders and see where Kurt Samuel is. I don't think I have it up in front of me, but it's pretty darn high right now. Let's get to another receiver that I've been in on pretty much all year. Unfortunately, hasn't gone all that well for Kendrick Bourne. But let's take a look at some data points here from Fantasy Points Data. Did some digging here. Among 80 wide receivers with at least 25 targets this year, among all receivers with at least 25, there's 80 of them. Kendrick Bourne is still 20th in expected fantasy points, 39th in first read target share, not too shabby there. 33rd in team yard percentage, and 22nd in targets per route run. Now, I would argue that these numbers would be a lot higher were it not for some tough matchups for Kendrick Bourne. I've been saying, look, the guy just needs competent quarterback play and a non-elite corner, basically, and he hasn't had that often this year. For example, we can look at week 2. He had a big game week 1, went off 6 grabs, 64 with 2 touchdowns. And he has clicked with Mac Jones dating back to 2021. Last year was not a good year for him, but Kendrick Bourne has been great all year. But then he had Miami. That was a lot of Xavier Howard that day. He caught 4 balls for 29. Then it was the Jets, and it was Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed. That was pretty rough. He still caught 4 for 46, not too shabby. Dallas, I believe he drew a lot of Gilmore in that game, 2 for 36. Of course, the offense was crippled. They scored 3 points. New Orleans, they scored 0 points. Not his fault. And he had Lattimore out there and Debo. He caught 2 for 43. But notice, finally gets a good matchup in week 6. And, oh, look, he goes off. He catches 10 of 11 targets for 89 yards. Granted, certainly a low yards per reception number, but, my man got 19 points. Bottom line, and I mentioned the numbers there, 20th out of 80 receivers, wide receivers with at least 25 targets and expected fantasy points. So basically, if Mac Jones doesn't suck and he's not up against a really good corner, Kendrick Bourne's a good play. So I'm going to talk him up once more here. I did a couple of weeks ago actually after week 1 when he broke out. And again, it hasn't been that great. That is why he's only owned in 17% of Yahoo leagues. I know he's a little boring, but these Patriots, I would still argue, can only get better. And that would also apply to McCorkle Jones. So I guess I'll move on here, but Kendrick Bourne, not too shabby of a pickup here. Let's go to another wide receiver that, while I was looking at this data, it was eye-opening, to say the least, and that is Rashee Rice, the rookie wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs, still playing essentially behind Sky Moore, but as difficult and as hard as Sky Moore makes it look, Rashee Rice makes it look that easy, basically, as a little bit of a check down option for Patrick Mahomes over the middle of the field. Had his best fantasy performance 2 weeks ago. I think I talked him up last week in a video. 4 grabs for 33 with a touchdown on 5 targets, 13.3 fantasy points with that good matchup against the Vikings. Well, he backed that up, catching all 4 of his targets last week on 18 routes for 72 yards against Denver in week 6. He's clearly the only wide receiver who has a chance here to gain the trust of Patrick Mahomes. Really thinking about Patrick Mahomes and looking at his career thus far, like, how many wide receivers have truly been, or any receiver, have truly been reliable with Patrick Mahomes? I think you could argue that only 2 of them have been, and they're both Hall of Famers, Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. So I think Patrick Mahomes is maybe tough to please, tough to get on his good side. Well, Rashee Rice is doing that quickly here. And while I did like Sky Moore, I was exactly wrong so far, and it doesn't look good. I also did like Rashee Rice quite a bit. I was thrown off by the fact that rookies continually struggle in Andy Reid's offense, but hey, Raishi Rice is different cat. I did request an interview with him at the combine. He was a great kid. Absolutely loved me some Raishi Rice. But looking through the fantasy points data suite, among these wide receivers with at least 80 targets, Raishi Rice, fantasy points per route run, second behind Tyreek Hill. Oh, first read target share. Where's he at there? Well, Tyreek Hill is 13th out of 80th. That's pretty good. Kendrick Bourne is 39th, by the way, as I mentioned previously, so that's not too bad. Raishi Rice is 78th. So this is a guy whose yard or targets, routes, everything should be really on the rise going forward. Raishi Rice for these Kansas City Chiefs. Targets per route run, second to Tyreek Hill again. So a lot of data points we can go over, but targets per route run, second to Tyreek Hill, yards per route run, fifth. Tyreek is leading the way there. Brandon Ayuk, Nico Collins, AJ Brown, and then Raishi Rice. I mean, look at this company that Raishi Rice is keeping here somewhat quietly here, owned in fewer than 50% of Yahoo leagues, but we're running out of time here, 45%. So there are some wide receiver recommendations. And then, I mean, we could talk running backs. There's a lot going on. I can give some quick thoughts. I thought Keontae Ingram, and I was absolutely wrong about DeMarcado last week. That was really the first grave error I think I made on all these waiver wire recommendations, at least for the immediate future. Number one, I didn't know that freaking Damian Williams would play as much as he did. For one, he was signed literally off his couch the week before, last Tuesday, to the practice squad, and then signed at the last minute. And then dude got a bunch of work, which surprised me. But I also thought Keontae Ingram looked as good as I've ever seen him. He caught a couple of his targets, all of his targets. So I thought he, again, looked very good. I think he's the early down guy and not a lost cause in terms of catching the ball. So there's that. Moving on to the Niner backfield, and we don't know about Christian McCaffrey. I would say now, though, that I'm going Jordan Mason. I think that's pretty clear. I think it could be a little bit of a dual committee. Of course, if CMC is out, Elijah Mitchell is going to be involved, but I'm going Mason at this point. I think the coaching staff has kind of raved about him in terms of his improvement this year. I think he's a little bit similar of a runner than McCaffrey as they're evolving with their running game a little bit. So maybe Elijah Mitchell isn't as effective. So I'm going Mason over Elijah Mitchell. Of course, if you can't get Mason, Elijah Mitchell is the next best thing. And then here's a sneaky one, by the way. Thank God Damian Harris looks like he's going to be okay, but he is also in the concussion protocol, and I would absolutely be stunned if he played this week. So Latavius Murray. Turns out when you never really had much of a short area burst, then you don't have anything to lose as you age. You're just a big lumbering dude out there who I'm sure is very decisive and probably reading his blocks well. So he's getting every yard out there on the field. Looks pretty good. Only owned in 14% of Yahoo leagues. And I think it's pretty clear that he's probably going to get 40 to 50% of the snaps, at least for as long as Damian Harris is out. And we know he'll probably get a bunch of scoring opportunities or at least touches near the goal line because they're just not using James Cook there much. And then real quick for these Rams, boy, do we really have to go to Royce Freeman? We might if they trust him more over the rookie Zach Evans, but I'm going to go with the rookie Zach Evans. I think he's next man up with Kyron Williams out, at least early down wise. He's not a horrible receiver. He did some things in college catching the rock, and I mean Royce Freeman has literally been the definition of a jag. No offense, I was not a Royce Freeman guy coming out. I remember a lot of people that year say, "Oh, Royce Freeman." I'm like, it's just a guy. No offense once again. So I'm going to go with Zach Evans, who might be just a little bit more than just a guy. Then last but not least here on your week 7 waiver wire report here, just a snippet from the fantasypoints.com report. 2 weeks ago, I'm here talking up Dalton Schultz, who is, over the last 3 weeks, like a league winner. He's like, I believe, the tight end 2 over the last 3 weeks. If you didn't get that one and you missed out on him, how about a little Michael Mayer? Look, I was just as baffled as everybody else 2 weeks ago when my man had one catch, I believe, on one target, or maybe two. Don't quote me. It may have been 2 targets the first 4 weeks. I believe he had one catch for 2 yards. We can look it up, but no one cares. The point is, over the last 2 weeks, the numbers and everything's looking up for Michael Mayer because, well, they had to, in my opinion, because are we really going to live with kind of ignoring Devontae Adams the last 2 weeks, but are we really just going to really feed the ball to Jacoby Myers, ignore Hunter Renfrow, and lately, at least, kind of not throw the ball to Devontae Adams? Somebody else needed to step up for the Raiders, and of course, that was Michael Mayer. Dude looks like a 5-year veteran out there. He's looked very good the last 2 weeks. He does, in fact, to me, look like Jason Witten out there. Over these last 2 weeks, among tight ends who have run at least 25 routes, there's 33 of them. Michael Mayer is 11th in air yard share and in ADOT, 14th in target percentage, 11th in targets per route run, and 6th in teams receiving yards market share, and 2nd among all tight ends over the last 2 weeks with at least 25 routes in yards per route run. Michael Mayer out there balling. So this could continue. You always like to look to young players, kind of catch lightning in a jar. So if you're still out there looking for an answer at tight end, Michael Mayer for the LV Raiders. Make sure you continue to like and subscribe. Good luck on that waiver wire. Good luck in week 7, and we'll talk to you next week.